Whether you loved it and consider it a modern classic, or you were so disgusted that you walked out of the theater, no one can deny that the 2024 body horror movie The Substance is quite literally unforgettable. You will not get the images this story presents on screen out of your head for several days. Before we continue, yes, I'll be spoiling the movie, so spoilers, yada yada yada. But far more fascinating than the plot of Coralie Farjat's sophomore offering to the big screen is the online discourse that it's generated over the past year. There's an almost universal consensus among female movie critics and their male feminist counterparts about this movie's message, its agenda, its allegorical themes, its one-to-one symbolism. We are told by these critics that this film is admonishing us as a society about the unreachable body standards that victimize women in modern Hollywood, beauty standards that continue to this day to endanger women, young and old, grooming them from a young age to be products of consumption, tempting them with dangerous diets, weight loss injections, and plastic surgery, all for the sake of the lustful male gaze. These young critics, mostly Gen Z and millennials at this point, they tell us in addition that this movie is a cautionary tale about the oppression of the patriarchy in Hollywood and its toxic masculinity. And inevitably, these critics remind us that it is exclusively men to blame for creating the culture and conditions which drive women to hurt themselves, physically and emotionally, for the sake of staying attractive to men, for as long as possible until they are finally aged out and discarded like a worthless biohazard in a landfill.
What a crock of shit.
In other words, in case you forgot since the last feminist fantasy fever dream, because you've got a new one coming out in your local theater at an almost weekly basis at this point, a woman might do something to themselves or others that the world considers evil, selfish, stupid, or infantile. But when you look closer, of course, you'll realize she is not the bad guy. Nor is she responsible for the consequences of her own actions. If her behavior could be construed as less than ideal, it's only because you don't know her backstory yet. Behind the scenes, it was actually a man who deceived her, blackmailed her, or otherwise forced her into this reprehensible conduct. A man, and almost always the one who is white and heterosexual, or to use the moronic modern prefix you learn in college these days, cis, which perhaps intentionally makes you sound like a boil on someone's ass. That guy, the cis straight white male, is always at the root of every woman's imperfections.
How do you write women so well?
I think of a man, and I take away reason and accountability.
We have seen this tired trope in dozens of Hollywood stories in the past decade, starting around the year 2015. It's always the same. Somehow, despite all their fame and fortune, no matter how many studios women control, no matter how many awards they are nominated for, no matter how many of their projects are greenlit, many of which lose investors hundreds of millions of dollars, if we go by the stories they're telling us on screen as an indication of their plight, women everywhere still remain enslaved by a system which objectifies them. These extraordinarily wealthy women deserve our sympathy, our acquiescence, and most of all, an apology from every man who ever questioned their truth, or who found them attractive for something other than their brilliant mind and its boundless creativity. Women are sacred. And yet, amidst all the critical praise and fan theories, no one, and I think at this point I've read and watched all of it, no one online has mentioned that The Substance, this modern-day Frankenstein story, resembles the 21st century movie business in no way whatsoever. Even as a Grimm's fairy tale or an Aesop's fable, this version of Hollywood doesn't reflect the industry of 2024, or even 2020, or 2015, even at a figurative level. The movie's 49-year-old filmmaker, Coralie Farjat, is depicting her own grievance against the movie industry, the one she slogged through in the past 3 decades. She has suggested as much in interviews.
I wanted the movie to be at the level of, how I've been feeling quite my whole life about this. Basically, I started to write the movie when I had passed my 40s, and I really started to think and hide these voices in my head like, okay, now your life is over. You're not going to be, no one is going to care about you. No one is going to be interested about you. This is really the end.
But you only have to look at her IMDb page to understand why this woman might have a Kathleen Kennedy-sized grudge against what was once a male-dominated industry. Her first credited job as an assistant director was in 2000. She wouldn't be recognized for an international critical success for another 24 years. Mad respect for the persistence. But by her own admission, Coralie saw and heard a lot from men that pissed her off about the industry.
I present it the way I think it is still organized in such a violent, misogynistic way, and I'm showing it. So it's topics that don't get discussed enough, you know. So I think it's when you get to discuss those topics in a more deeper, you know, layers, because it's complex issues.
Nevertheless, critics react to The Substance as if the relationship between the protagonist and her sleazy executive boss is a daily reality for every aging 21st century actress, when nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, if you wanted to be accurate, you would swap their positions completely. So, given the sometimes ludicrous online discourse surrounding The Substance, I thought it would be an interesting thought experiment to consider how this movie would play out in the real world, in the real movie industry of the 21st century, in 2026, rather than the fabricated fantasy depicted here, which was created, as always, solely to perpetuate the false narrative we must all continue to swallow. Man evil, woman good. Let's start with that sleazy executive Harvey, an obvious and not at all subtle nod to the infamous Harvey Weinstein, whose greatest act of evil, by the way, was not 3 decades of transactional intercourse, but the smear campaign he orchestrated in 1998 to steal the Best Picture Oscar from Saving Private Ryan and ensure it went to his overwrought, overrated dog turd, Shakespeare in Love.
Harvey, thank you for killing whoever you had to kill to get me up here today.
First of all, if we were going for a fair depiction of this Hollywood mogul, he wouldn't be surrounded by an entourage of bald, wrinkled shareholders. It would be instead the sycophantic middle-aged women of Hollywood stardom, all of them around the same age as Coralie, this movie's director, the women of the Me Too movement, the ones who called Harvey a god and indeed worshipped him like one. The women who lied for him and protected his dark secrets for just as long as it was necessary for them to gain enough wealth, prominence, influence, and independence that they could safely throw him under the bus. Deservedly, I might add, but that doesn't make you a hero, ladies.
I believe women.
So no proof, though, but you still believe them?
Yes.
You see the quotations I'm making with my claw hands? It means I don't believe you.
Are your confessions about Harvey's nasty habits somehow less stunning and brave because you waited 20 years to make them, until there was only the most minuscule risk to your sundowning careers? Are you all as guilty as his favorite assistant, the exalted Leslie Headland, of profiting off Harvey just long enough to no longer need him before standing united with the full backing of the mainstream media in universal condemnation?
In a lengthy and damning 2017 Facebook post days after the story broke, writer and producer Scott Rosenberg echoed Master's claim of a pernicious culture of silence in Hollywood. He wrote, "And to me, if Harvey's behavior is the most reprehensible thing one can imagine, a not-so-distant second is the current flood of sanctimonious denial and condemnation that now crashes upon these shores of rectitude in gloppy tides of bullshit righteousness, because everybody knew. And do you know how I am sure that this is true? Because I was there, and I saw you, and I talked about it with you. You, the big producers, you, the big directors, you, the big agents, the big financiers, and you, the big rival studio chiefs. You, the big actors. You, the big actresses. You, the big models." So much of the condemnation against Weinstein from Hollywood rings hollow, given all the effusive praise that same crowd once heaped upon Weinstein, never mind their willful ignorance toward the man's many depravities.
If there was an allegorical event in ancient history, it reminds me most of that great scene at the end of HBO's Rome, Season 1, when a dozen or so senators, rather than meeting Julius Caesar on an open battlefield or challenging him to a duel, they wait until the so-called tyrant is unarmed and defenseless before stabbing him to death, then celebrating themselves as heroes of the Republic before running and scattering in several directions.
I had to. It's in my blood. My ancestor dethroned the tyrant Tarquin.
I understand there were a great many who stabbed your Caesar.
But I delivered the final blow.
Seems a bit cowardly, no?
You say what?
He was wounded already, dying, defenseless, alone. And you stabbed him yet again.
He was a tyrant. Killing him was a necessity, a necessary and noble act.
Perhaps I shall find a fresh corpse to stab and become great myself.
Well, you dare to insult me?
Two things can be true at once, ladies. Harvey Weinstein was a scumbag in the business, but so is everyone complicit in Hollywood's darkest secret, everyone who engaged in his hierarchical business model of physical transaction. As the lawyers say, qui tacet consentire videtur. Those who stay silent are understood to consent. Isn't that the standard that the progressive left holds the rest of us to? Silence is violence, they say. Would it have been instead more valiant and selfless for any of these Hollywood starlets to expose Harvey to the world the morning after he victimized them, sacrificing their own future career for the sake of saving the next young woman who finds herself alone with him from his ghastly grip? Some of them did, but most did not. And why not? Why did you not stand together 10 or 15 years ago? Why did you simply let the priority of bringing him down simmer on the back burner while you grabbed your own bag for 2 decades? Why did you not choose to sacrifice yourself for the sake of others and prevent more suffering? As I said before, if you're asking that question, it's because you don't understand the rules, perfectly exemplified by the substance. Whatever Harvey's entourage of women chose to do or not do, it is his fault, not theirs. And if you think I'm being unfair, holding these women up to an impossible standard in an impossible situation, women are capable of great courage in the face of adversity. Women are capable of self-sacrifice for the sake of others, or for an ideal greater than themselves. To take just one example, look at the women of the street debate genre, independent journalists like Angela Rose, Caitlin Bennett, and Savannah Craven, entering into the midst of bloodthirsty leftist mobs to expose their hypocrisy, risking attack and assault, sometimes even their own death to reveal the truth. Women can be incredibly courageous. You just don't see much of it in Hollywood. What you see instead is a lot of people looking to be exalted for signaling their virtue. Nor is it a sufficient excuse to say this was an open secret and everybody kept it, men and women. The idea that you should stand on principle, even if you stand alone, is a lesson most of us learned before the end of 6th grade. And if I could belabor the point for just a moment further, ladies, there is nothing stunning and brave about getting a pat on the back and a standing ovation from a room full of people who already agree with you at an awards ceremony or in the shelter of a private interview. That's not brave. Bravery is solely reserved for those who show courage in the face of adversity.
Blessed be the Lord, my strength, who teaches my hands to war, and my fingers to fight.
If I stand up in the middle of a Baptist church during a spiritual revival and proclaim that Jesus Christ is Lord, that he's the only path to salvation, that all other gods are false, I might be considered mildly disruptive, but I'm not going to get nearly the same kind of rebuke as I would if I did the same in the center of a Muslim mosque. If there is no adversity, no threat, nothing precious you are risking by speaking the truth, then you have shown no courage. Zip, zilch, zero. So please, you can't claim on one hand that it was impossible for the men and women of Hollywood to expose Harvey for 2 decades, that he held that much leverage over all of you, and then simultaneously praise every woman who comes forward to accuse after all the damage has been done. Like it's the last act of the crucible. Just choose one or the other, and then for heaven's sakes, please sit down. So, now that my Harvey rant is over, let's start by replacing Harvey's crusty coterie of old and intentionally white men with the actresses who fawned over him, and next consider the power he supposedly wields over Elizabeth Sparkle, our protagonist. In the movie, Harvey's control over her career trajectory is absolute when he decides to retire her from her own show to replace her with a younger performer. Elizabeth responds with quiet obedience, accepting her fate completely. She says almost nothing. Now remember that if Harvey is an allegory for Weinstein, then Elizabeth Sparkle, our protagonist, is an allegory for the now middle-aged actresses who fell victim to Harvey's predations. In fact, the catalyst of Elizabeth's 50th birthday puts her in exactly the right age range of Harvey's accusers, alongside women like Angelina Jolie, Daryl Hannah, Rosanna Arquette, and Salma Hayek. All of whom, lest we forget, were just fine with the open secret of Harvey's blackmail up to the exact moment that they no longer needed him, and his leverage waned with diminishing box office returns. If we grant this filmmaker Coralie that leeway, and accept as fact the specious premise that a woman like Elizabeth would suffer in silence and not resist the ignominious fate of being replaced and cast aside during the Weinstein era of Hollywood, that still doesn't carry much weight in the Hollywood of today, the Hollywood of 2024. It doesn't reflect the reality of modern time, in which most positions of power and influence over the most valuable intellectual properties are controlled by women. Titans like David Zaslav and Bob Iger might be on the top floor of the studio, but it's the women who run the show and shape the culture of every channel, every streaming service, every single intellectual property these days.
The power of one, the power of two, the power of many. The power of one, the power of two, the power of many.
In other words, if we were to make the substance more realistic, we'd have to replace Harvey with a woman, A big boss like Kathleen Kennedy, who has controlled Lucasfilm since Disney purchased it for $4 billion, or Jennifer Salke, the head of Amazon Studios, which bought the rights to Lord of the Rings for $250 million. These women control the stories because they control the writers' rooms and therefore what is written and what is excised. According to the great Echo Chamberlain's recent probe, women dominate dramatic TV writers' rooms by 60%, streaming series by 55%, and young adult animation and prestige dramedies by as much as 70%. Casting directors, the people who decide which race and sex get to embody each role, are 75% women.
It's not true. That's impossible.
However, let's set the stats aside for the moment and use an extreme example, as The Substance is an extreme story. Since Harvey in the movie is supposed to symbolize the absolute worst among male television executives, let's replace him with a truly despicable and oppressive woman of monstrous power. I mean someone truly destructive and egomaniacal. Lauren Schmidt Hissrich. Showrunner of the Witcher series, responsible for its complete devastation and 4 seasons of disrespecting and bastardizing that intellectual property source material so badly that the show's lead, Henry Cavill, became disillusioned and quit what he considered to be the greatest role of his career. Now that Harvey is Hissrich and our story better reflects the movie and TV business in 2025, let's close by talking about the real victims in modern Hollywood, who is truly being discriminated against and replaced by the woke activism rotting this institution to its core. So, let's replace Elizabeth in our story with this actor, whom we'll give the name Travis Bickle, since he will undoubtedly become frustrated with the system that marginalizes him. In early 2026, Travis is a 49-year-old, moderately handsome, blue-eyed, blonde-haired actor, slowly transforming into a silver fox on a reboot of the new hit TV show CSI: The Last City, a dystopian iteration of the crime scene investigation drama from the early 2000s. Given that title because the executives couldn't think of a major urban metropolis which hadn't been used as a setting before. Travis is a supporting character, but after 25 years of working in Hollywood, it's the first big role, the breakout role of his career, and he's a fan favorite. His stellar performance rockets the show to the top of the streaming charts. In interviews and on social media, he avoids politics best he can and sidesteps the javelin when entertainment journalists try to pigeonhole him on his opinion about their favorite subject. Life is good for Travis. He's one of the rare men of modern Hollywood to overcome the discrimination the industry has against actors of his race and sex. It hasn't been easy for him, a character actor surviving in a Hollywood captured by the activist agenda of diversity, equity, and inclusion, wherein studios must meet racial and gender quotas not only to be eligible for awards, but to avoid backlash from the mainstream media, so eager to vilify them for not catering to a global, modern audience. For 25 years, Travis survived on small roles and worked part-time as a carpenter, built sets in between gigs, driving limos when money got real bad. All that changed when Netflix bought the CSI series from CBS, and Travis finally got the role of his life. Which is why Travis felt so nervous when, after the first hit season, CSI's showrunners were replaced to take the show in a more progressive direction, under the esteemed leadership of Lauren Schmidt Hissrich, hot off her staggering achievements in The Witcher. A week before the start of production on Season 2, Hissrich calls Travis into her office. Upon reaching her suite, Travis can't help but notice the cold stares, the nasty looks from Lauren's new staff, especially her administrative assistant, who has a post-it attached to the bottom right of her computer screen which reads, "Straight, male, and pale is stale." Inside, Lauren explains that she's taking Travis's character in a new direction for Season 2. He'll be exploring his latent homosexuality with a new non-binary character, a rookie investigator named Athena Driggs. The love scenes, Lauren explains, will be light. She asks if he ever saw the movie Brokeback Mountain. Dumbstruck, Travis explains that as a Christian man, he's not comfortable with this new direction, nor does he think it fits his character's masculine trajectory in the opening season. A married father of 2 and former Navy SEAL who entered law enforcement after serving his country. Lauren smiles sympathetically, saying she's sorry to hear that his religious bigotry and its endemic homophobia has rendered him so closed-minded and intolerant, and that it's now holding him back from the next stage in his career. Lauren then explains that she anticipated his decision and his other option is to resign the show, wherein his character will be killed off-camera and explained away in the opening episode of Season 2, replaced by a more tolerant actor, and one which better reflects the diversity that Netflix is looking for. Travis drives home despondent and doesn't leave his house for the next 3 days. Friday morning, retrieving his mail disheveled and unshaven, he opens a blank envelope which reveals a USB drive. Plugging it into his laptop, an ominous voice intones,
Have you ever dreamt of a better version of yourself?
A more diverse and inclusive version of yourself? Do you find your career prospects sabotaged by your innate physical characteristics through no fault of your own? Do you feel incensed and frustrated by postmodern institutions which value diversity for the sake of itself and ignore meritocracy and talent completely? What would you pay to have a version of you that could only fail upwards, wherein no matter what you do, your sexual preferences, race, and gender protected you from all scrutiny and criticism?
I'd pay anything, Travis sighs. And so it is born, the Substance 2026 Reimagined. The only question is, dear viewer, who would you cast as Travis's untouchable 7-day counterpart? The better version of himself, the one who is born out of his spinal column, takes over his life, and ultimately beats him to death in his own apartment, as a symbolic act of neo-Marxist progress, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Who is the most stunning and brave? Who is the most protected from censure and fault-finding, universally praised when they stumble? Who is the most gilded lily, coddled and fiercely protected? Cynthia Erivo, Elliot Page, Bella Ramsey, Amanda Steinberg, Erica Ishii, Ruby Rose? Let me know your casting choice for our reimagined Substance sequel in the comments. And if you hated every second of this video and hate me for making it, and probably wish I was dead, and are currently spurging out and hurling epithets at the screen which include suffixes like ist and phobe and cell, but managed to make it to the end, I still thank you for listening to my blunt and coarse diatribe. I'd love to hear from you in the comments as well. Do you think I'm right or wrong in my assessment of the Harvey situation? Have I misinterpreted Coralie's intentions in any way? And if you'd like to hear the most raw and honest video I've ever made, a deep dive into the legacy of Charlie Kirk and the hypocrisy of the Catholic Pope, click on this video on your screen right now.